Start. Let me see. So just a brief introduction, and then actually I'm going to let Vic Blake, who's the curator, and Dave Matthews, who's one of the database programmers, take over. This presentation isn't designed to cover all of T3. So this first slide I have up, it's mostly the function that I view T3 to be is as a data resource for the TCAP in general. So this slide shows all of the different streams of experiments and data that TCAP is working through, and all of the data transits through T3. The reason that's important is that it will allow everybody to have access to the same data, to have the most updated set of data, in other words, curated. And regardless of if you're in Montana but you need to work on data from North Dakota, it's there for you, and so forth. So it's really a collaboration tool. That's its main purpose. So it's sort of data central for TCAP. It can also be used by individual breeding programs, and in part, the presentation today can help make that possible if you're interested in that. The purpose of databases in general, and for breeding programs in particular, is to give you a place to save your data, obviously, integrate your data over years, over locations, experiments, whatever, curate your data in a uniform way, in a consistent way, and then obviously to retrieve combined data sets efficiently and to subset data sets easily, so you can retrieve and go after the specific data that you want. So that's T3 in general. What we want to do today is talk about uploading data to the database. So we're going to use Barley as the example. So as you probably know, T3 is separated into T3 wheat and T3 barley. The two databases are mirrors of each other, except for minor details having to do with the properties of the lines and so forth. Obviously, the data in them is completely different. There's a couple of reasons why we want to talk about downloading. One thing is we just want to encourage people to submit data by showing to them, hopefully, that it's easy to submit data. It's also, if you're running experiments for TCAP, it's mandatory that you submit your data to T3. And now, something that's mandatory doesn't necessarily get done, but easy to do, that'll encourage you to do it, okay? And so we're trying to make this easier, and
Ooh, we just lost you, John.
Yeah, you can't hear me?
I hear him.
Uh-oh.
Yep, I can hear him too.
Okay, well, I'll keep going. Am I still on?
Yeah, okay. If you go back to, sorry about the pause, if you go back to the Plant Breeding Training Network room, the Adobe Connect room, you'll have a little drop down under your microphone, and you can adjust your microphone volume and maybe turn it up just a little bit. I'm not sure if that'll help with the cutting out.
Okay. So yeah, so anyway, submitting data to the database, it's going to be important. It's going to be important for how well the TCAP functions in general. And I should say, too, that it's an active area of concern for the Scientific Advisory Board. So one of the parts of the Scientific Advisory Board report was that they were concerned that data wasn't going to flow in here as quickly as possible. So we want to make it easy to submit data, and if you have ideas on making it even easier, please tell us. All right. Now, it turns out that to submit data to T3, you need to be a curator for what we call the production database, which is what I have up on the screen now. So trinitytoolbox.org/barley. there's only one. Well, the main curator is Vic Blake, who you'll be hearing from, and so she's the one who submits data to the production database. We have this system called the Sandbox. There's a Sandbox for wheat and there's a Sandbox for barley. Now, these sandboxes, they're sort of play databases. They are exact mirrors. At the beginning of the day, they're exact mirrors of the production database. But then you can go into them, and so everyone is a curator on the Sandbox. You just have to log in. And so here's how you log in. That's the username and the password. Okay, so then you go over to login register, and you click on that. So you put in T3 user. Oh, there we go. And then it knows the password, but like I said, the password is just T3 password. Okay, and then you click on register. And then pretty soon, I hope. Oh, sorry. I messed that up. So T3 user, password, continue. Pretty soon it should redirect me so that I have a curation menu. Now, so the whole point of the Sandbox is that you can bring your data sets and your upload templates to the Sandbox, make sure that they are working well, and they upload into the Sandbox. And once they do, it's an easy step to send them over to Vic, who can upload them into the production database.
Passolia,
Is that?
and connect, I think.
No, we're hearing you. So the most important thing I have to say about the Sandbox is that it's not permanent, right? It gets every day.
Connect.unl.edu.
Sandbox gets synchronized with the production database. So when you have inputted something as a trial data set into Sandbox,
unl.edu.
it'll be gone to it'll be gone
It may be necessary /pbtn.
Okay. So I've decided gone tomorrow.
We got to stop, Dave. You got to mute your microphone, please. We can't hear John Luke anymore.
Definitely will have to be unl.edu preceded
Dave,
by
can you hear me?
at least.
Here.
Here I am. Sorry about that.
All right, so that's the Sandbox. So it's there for you to try out your data templates, and but realize that it's not perfect. Okay, so then I just wanted to mention what the system in general is that we have these upload templates, and over the course of today and possibly a second session, we want to show you 4 templates. One is a line submission template. So it's where you upload basic information, properties about your breeding lines. A trial annotation template, similar thing but for experiments. And then there's phenotype submission. So once you've run a phenotyping experiment, you have data on those lines, you submit that using the phenotype submission template. And then there's also a genotype submission template, which is a similar thing but for marker data that you might get from Xiaomin or from Gina Brown-Gadira. So with that, I'm going to pass control over to Dave, who's going to talk about line submission. Take it away, Dave.
Okay. What was that?
Take it away.
Okay. All right. So here I am logged into the Sandbox. I am user T3 user. And so basically we went through that part with Jean-Luc. So when you're logged in, you get the curation menu, which has all the functions for loading data. And we're going to start with line information, the germplasm lines. And I'll walk through several of the functions, starting with adding brand new lines from a spreadsheet, but we'll also talk about editing data and the concept of line panels probably. So again, I maybe missed it, but I wanted to point out that from the home page, there's a little button to click to the data submission page, which has a very nice tutorial on loading lines that Vicki prepared. And you can look at that. And it has the templates for filling in the spreadsheets that we're about to use, which are also available from the from this example link here. So I downloaded the example, and it is this, except for line, row 8, which I just added. So it has the example of Morex and Stander and the information. All of our templates are real data that is already loaded in the database. So one of the principles of how the data loading works is you could reload the same thing unchanged as many times as you want and nothing will happen. If you change something, then that will be edited. So if I change the GRIN PI number here, and similarly you can upload a file that has partially existing data and partially new data. So that's what we're going to load here. I created a new line, gave it an alias, gave it a PI number, gave it some invalid values to see what would happen. And we'll go ahead and load that and work through the errors and then see if we can get it to load properly. So that's this one. And I hope that wasn't too quick. I just said upload and it did it. And the result is it shows you what you've loaded. This is just a reading of the file to validate that the file was read properly, not that anything in it is correct. But if there was invalid data, we have tried to test for some things that are not legal and spit out error messages to guide you. In this case, I gave it a line name that contains a blank. Besides the tutorial, there's also instructions in the yellow box about some of the rules. For example, use all capital letters. I disobeyed that one too, and I see even our template has disobeyed it. Oops. We need to fix that. But what happened when we loaded was it simply capitalized them for us. It has caught that we've got a problem here that I plugged in the PI number that was already loaded for a different line. That would be a potential error that needs to be followed up, either to change the value for DOIS or to remove the value for DOIS or to change the value for new line. Let's see, we've got a blank in here, so let's just fix this. Filial generation 1 to 9 is required. I was just testing whether I had a range check on that, and I guess I do. So we'll put it within the range. You cannot lean on these error checks to do your work for you in terms of correctness. So, you know, I said it was filial generation 8, but maybe it isn't. Alias names will, let's see, I believe, let's just put in here M64 and see what it does if it hits the same alias for two different lines. Some of these values are invalid, but I would have thought they would have been caught before. The goal I had here was to output all the errors for the whole thing at once, so that you didn't have to go through too many cycles, but it may not have. Succeeded completely. All right, let's see. So I didn't change that. Alias M64 is used more than once in this file, and it's already a synonym for a different line. So it's not going to like M64 there, and it's not going to like this invalid PI value. Let's see if I put in, remember this is the sandbox, so you can put in whatever you want to experiment with no harm done. And it has tested whether that was a valid formulation of a PI number, and evidently not. So, oh, how hard would it be to fool it? Give it one more try without bogging down here. It was, nope, no problem. PI 123. Okay, so once you have got through the checks that we can automate, it gives you one more bit of potentially helpful information. It tells you, in case you had a whole lot of them, which ones are new lines, new names that the database never heard of, and which ones are going to potentially be changed if there's any data different. This is and you still have a chance to bail out. The instructions here are meant to indicate what happens if you alter the data for an existing line, which is basically in almost every case it replaces the existing values. The exception is for fields that can have more than one value, which is only aliases. So if we added more aliases, they would be in addition to the existing ones. So that is the basics of loading the data through the spreadsheet interface. Now I promised the other ways of changing things. So let's go to those synonyms. If you have multiple synonyms and you loaded one that was wrong, you can't just overwrite it. Also, none of these values can be deleted just by zeroing out the, I believe it's true. Deleting values is not so easy. So if I just took that away, it would not necessarily remove the value for standard. So we have other interfaces for doing deletions and removals. Oops. Okay, so now I can remove that synonym or this accession just like that. And if I look up standard, it should have no grin accession. Oh, this is a good point at which to point out, if you want to see immediately what happened, use the quick search, and this will show you the record as it is in the database after your work. And indeed, there is no grin accession. It's just the crop science identifier there. Okay, so that's the synonyms. Most of the other, so this is where it gets scary. Most of the other data about a line is unique values and is in the same table with the line names themselves, and so it can all be handled in one operation. And the thing to know about this horrible interface is that if you type in the one that you're after, then you get only, in this case, the 2 pages of of Barley lines that contain the word standard anywhere in them. And if you can find the one that was the one you want, the way to make a change is to click the checkbox, and that will activate. The others are still inactive. And then you can just type into any of these boxes and make those changes. Let's see. So New line. We successfully loaded whiskey and spring and hold without any. Let's just check what we got from that one. See if new line comes up here.
You have to hit update, Dave, to get that information to stick.
Oh yeah, the change that I made, that I was starting there, didn't actually happen. Right. So, but I'm right now a little bit concerned about why new line didn't show up here. Oh, did it not successfully load? Let me just do that again. Maybe I did cancel. Or maybe I never had valid data. Oh, right, I never said accept. Okay. And good. Okay, so now we get into some of the other error messages that are less nicely intercepted. So now you're looking at raw error messages from the database about unallowed values. And this is trying to tell you that 2 and 6 were the only allowed values for row type. And that indeed I didn't fool it with this one. And it will probably throw up about spring as well, and maybe about whiskey. And again, this is the ugly interface that hasn't been well intercepted, and it only gives you the first error that it runs into, it dies. So you would have to go through multiple cycles of that. So let us know your experiences, whether you run into a lot of trouble with these. I have to say that several people have been loading lines and have not reported much in the way of inconvenience from this stuff. So that's cool. Okay, one more thing about line panels. This is a new feature. This is to add or delete line panels. By popular request, people wanted to be able to assemble collections of lines by querying out a set of lines of interest and then save them for themselves. When you are logged in, and only when you are logged in, line panels become available to you. If you're logged in as a curator, they're available in 2 ways. One from everybody's menu and one from the curator menu that we just went through. Okay, so there's 2 kinds of line panels. Basically, the curator can create public ones, and for the production database, that would be only Vicki. But anybody can request to have her do that. And in addition to that, anybody who's logged into any of these databases has this menu option, which looks a little different. So somebody, I'm sorry, and so what is shown is only that person's own personal panels. So somebody today apparently logged in as T3 user and created this panel here. And those appear then when you're using the select by properties as one of the properties. So you have panels that you created at the top of the list, and then the everybody's panels that are created, if any, by the curator. Okay, so I feel like I went through that pretty quick. What about questions? And I guess those will have to come in as chats.
Yeah, well, people are typing. This is Vic. I just want to make a comment that if you do any editing in the sandbox, make sure that you let the curator, let me, know if you want that to be on the public production DB, because it won't stick overnight. So again, any editing on your lines or anything like that has to be through the production database to be permanent. Okay, is it me? Are we ready to move on to phenotype annotations?
Let me just say that we are very eager to have your questions. So now is as good a time as any.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have a question now, it's always good to email us. So please, I mean, we want to make this easier for you guys, and the best way to do that is to get your questions. But so with that said, I guess we can turn it over to Vic.
Okay, great. So, all right. So let me know, Jannik, if you can't see my screen, okay? Okay, can we see the Barley Sandbox again?
Yeah, we're seeing the Barley Sandbox from your screen.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so the next bit of curation we're going to talk about is uploading phenotype experiments. And with that and genotype, there's actually more than one file type you need to deal with for this case. So I'm logged on to the Barley Sandbox. This is your sandbox. And I have one extra tab up here because I'm a regular curator. Okay, again, there's a few places to get example files and templates. You can go through the data submission button, and that's basically a one-stop shopping. We just went through line data, and then now we're going to deal with phenotyping. And there is a little tutorial. I need to do some more work on it now, but you can pretty much get to what I'm going to be talking about through this. It's sort of a screenshot PowerPoint link. Okay, so if the other way you can get on, and I logged me off. I guess if you don't have an active login for a while, it'll log you off. So let me just get back online here. Sorry about that. Make sure I remember my password. Okay. So as I said, that the participants page has sort of a one-stop shopping for all of your forms, and they're also there in context in the individual upload little webs, if you will. I'm going to tell you this is going to be changing. It's a little bit confusing to add or delete a phenotype experiment, just in that statement. We're going to be moving the delete an experiment, which will delete both the annotations and all the results, onto its own little menu tab. And then these three things for adding the phenotype experiment annotation will remain. And this is, let me just state that this is just for the annotation file. Okay, when we first started T3, we were only able to accept the THT from the old Hordium Toolbox style phenotype file. So that's still there as an option to load in that style. But now we have the new T3 style. So for annotations, again, here's one example where we can get an example for that. And we'll open that up automatically, and voila. Okay, so these are really nice in that it gives you the Excel sheet, and it also has this big text box that you don't even need to worry about deleting. It just tells you all the information. You can leave it there, and it will upload beautifully. On this page, everything that's highlighted in red, let me just see if I can get this a little better. Hopefully you can see that a little better. Everything highlighted in red is mandatory, and everything that's not, you don't have to include if you don't want to. Like experiment code, that's just sort of another higher level if you wanted to organize your experiments that way. Begin weather date is another one. This was sort of a holdover from THT, but it's not something that's necessarily going to be pertinent to your experiments. And remarks at the end. We welcome them, but they're not mandatory. Okay, so to load that kind of an annotation file, you're going to want to browse your data. Of course, you will have already prepared one that's particular to yours. This is just a copy of one that I uploaded before. And you'll hit Upload Annotations File. And again, that was the one we just saw. And in this case, okay, it likes everything that's there. It shows us this on the screen, but it's also telling us that it's going to update the record because these trial codes are already there. It's just a little flag. It will overwrite that, okay, if that's not something you want to have happen. Now, there are a few ways that you can mess up. Trust me, I've done every way possible. Here's one way where, in this case, I had put in the wrong breeder code. So right here, where it's supposed to be AB for Idaho, I had put AD in that version. Whoops, where am I? Get back to my screen. Oh, sorry, you guys. This is embarrassing. Okay, hold on a second. Let me just close this down. Okay, if you're wondering though, okay, where do I find out this information? Where are these breeding codes? If you go back to the original homepage, and there's a few places. You can find the breeding programs by just looking at this little drop down. So University of Idaho should have had AB. That's why AD gave us an error. And then another place in the CAP data programs. This also has the breeding programs, and it also has the codes for the genotyping labs, for example, the North Dakota genotyping labs. You're going to have at one point the genotyping. You're going to ask for the data code. That's where you're going to find that. Okay, one other way to break Barley Sandbox is, let's see, phenotype experiment. I'm going to try the one other thing, and it doesn't always tell you, this will show you, it doesn't always tell you right away. Okay, so when you have the dates, it's T3 is pretty particular. It wants the dates to be, and this is going to be fixed in the notes, strictly text. Now in this case I have it as a date format. It loaded it as if, oh, it looks like it's going to work. It says update, everything is there. But if you hit accept, then you get your error, and it will say, please use correct format for planting date. So it, you know, don't ever think you're safe just because you're seeing that screen. Okay, so that is it for annotations. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to write to us. Don't get frustrated. Okay, and then I'm going to hand this back over to Dave, and he's going to show you how to format the phenotype data upload, the results for uploading.
Are you ready to roll, Dave? Let's see.
If you still see my screen, there's a reason why I'm logging into my email.
Yeah. But also, Dave, I guess I'm not sure why we're not seeing your screen. Or oh.
Yeah, you need to minimize the connect. He knows that.
Okay. Ah, there we go.
There we go.
Dave, it seems like your microphone might also be muted. At least I'm not hearing anything from you.
I don't think it's a problem in Connect, Dave. It might actually be on your headset.
Oh,
Oh,
hello.
I think we
Hello? Oh,
Yep, we got you.
that's interesting. Okay, great. So I don't have to reconnect.
You're back.
Great. And that wouldn't have worked either. Okay. So now we're back. I wonder what happened. All right. Okay, so line submissions done. What I was about to comment to you, Vicki, was that your trial submission form was different from what I have here. It had garbage characters and extra text and so forth. We need to find out where that one came from. I got mine, I believe, from the data submission page. I think maybe you got yours from the actual upload page. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll work that out.
Yep. Okay, so this is the template freshly downloaded from that data submission page for phenotype data. And it has just some examples of two traits and an indication of which fields are required. Again, we can mess with it a little bit, but if we load it as is, it will not change anything. And in this case, I don't see anything that would add additional values. Like if you put in another value here, it's still only going to load one and so forth. Again, the yellow box has some instructions. We don't have a tutorial all written, Oh, actually, yes, Vicki, your tutorial does cover some of this.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Filial generation is a requirement in the line form, but it's optional here, I believe, in case your generation of the lines that you're using are different from the ones that were stored as lines initially. So the two required fields are the name itself, which must match a value that's already in the database, a name, and whether the line is a check or not, 0 or 1. And those are the only things. So I guess we can just change one of those items and oh, a protected view. Hey, change one of those and see an error. So this is going to be under the experiment results. We're going to rename these curation menus to be more explicit. So the first item is going to be called add a phenotype experiment annotation to refer to the description of the experiment that Vicki was just describing. And then this one will be called the results again in T3 format. There's an option for both a raw data file, which can be absolutely anything. It's simply archived under that experiment and can be retrieved. But the means file is the data file that we were just looking at that gets loaded into the database. Let's see, where did I store that sucker? I guess under this. Phenotype submission form. Okay. Let's try loading that. And it's either the current or a previous copy of the same thing. Oh, I see. I have to find out which one I just mucked with. It was in, downloads. Let's see, so I'll put it where I can find it when I load it.
While Dave is doing that, let me just insert here that when you have your line names, either in genotype or phenotype data, you can use either the primary name that we have loaded, or you can use a synonym. And that's why we have unique synonyms or aliases in the database. A lot of the early genotype experiments came off with just PI numbers. So that saved me a real headache being able to load them with just that.
Right. Good point. Missing check value, so it is required. And a bad line name will give us, that wasn't the friendliest, but that was okay. And that's the error message for that. Otherwise it goes in, oh yeah, I guess we should just do a successful one. Hey. I cannot resist testing these things.
So right there, you're testing whether it's going to accept lowercase.
Right. And it didn't. Interesting. Okay.
You had two N's, though.
Oh, I did? No, not a good test. I'll deal with that on my own time. Okay, so a successful load then shows you, as we saw before, what it was going to load and gives you the option to abort. And so we can use that to change the values, to edit if there is a mistake, and we could add additional columns with more traits and so forth. oh yeah, I didn't test what happens if it doesn't recognize the trait name, but I believe these must exactly match an existing trait name in the database.
Can you show us
So,
how to find the trait names?
right. So one place to find your trait names is here in the menu of search by trait. And where else could we find a comprehensive list that you could just easily download? I don't think it's available. Hmm.
Well,
Well, the add edit traits, you can, it's not pretty. But you can.
Let's see what that looks like. So that's certainly not pretty. Well, we'll wait till a user asks us to supply them with a list of traits. That's a good question. Add traits doesn't easily give you that either. Okay, that's all I can think of that needs saying about the phenotype. Oh yes. We're just discussing today about these trial level statistics that the rows 8 through 10 are maybe optional, or maybe ones that we want to delete. Jean-Luc thinks standard error is good enough, and the others are just spreading the same information around into multiple options.
so basically what's important is that T3 has some measure of the quality of the data in the trial. Standard error is a good way of conveying that quality of the data. Those other measures in rows 8, 9, and 10, they give similar kinds of information, but I'd rather that everybody submit the same information. So chances are a revised form will come out that only asks for the standard error, and that will be a requirement.
The summary statistics should include the checks. That is mentioned in the everybody should be doing it the same way, and so I don't know a way that we can enforce it on our end. We just need to have people do it the same way.
Okay, so any questions about this phenotype results submission? So you've submitted the line names, the lines are in the database. Then you submit trial information, this annotation file that Vic showed. Then there's a separate form to submit the results from that trial. The template has 2 columns of data, but you can have any number of columns. Okay, so this is exciting. Mary has a question. Are we intending to submit results after all the data has been collected and analyzed, or as the data comes in? Right, so Vic answers as soon as you can. I mean, there's a balance between doing it immediately and doing it sort of in batches to make it more practical. But we are concerned that Vic will get overloaded with data if it all comes in at once at the end of the year or whatever. So, well, with the objective coordinators, we have started to organize target times sort of within a month, target times of when various kinds of phenotypic data will be submitted. So hopefully we're starting to get a handle on when that should be.
I would say after harvest, however.
That's right.
Yeah, I know. That's a good point Mary brings up.
If you've measured, light interception during the growing season, you don't need to submit that until you've harvested the plots. So yeah, don't submit fabricated data just for the sake of submitting data that you have already collected. Okay, so I think we're going to go from there to Vic, who's just going to talk about submitting genotype data.
Yeah, and I'll make this really fast because I realize we're getting on with the hour here. Okay, so I suspect you're seeing me again. Okay, this is what happens when bad things happen after you submit your it's a little bit of a foreshadowing. Oh gosh, I lost my sandbox. Sorry about that, you guys. Just a second. Eek. So we have a lot more genotype data that's been submitted. We've got about, I don't know, 6 or 7 whole complete experiments in just one phenotype experiment. So I really do encourage you guys to get the data to me because I don't have a whole lot going on right now, making tutorials and things like that, but that is going to change in the future, I hope. So again, I'm logged on again. It remembers that. Again, with genotype data, like the other types of data we talked about, there's the one-stop shopping, and then you can also get it in context through the curation menu. Genotype data, we are able to take it in a 1D table, which is just one long line of, I'll show you what that looks like, of just the sample name, what the marker is, and then what the A and the B allele are. And this is basically 1500 for this sample and then on to the 1500 for the next. Or, better, we now have the ability to load 2D data, which basically has the markers in column A and then the line names across the top. And that's what the data is going to look like. The annotation data, it looks, well, similar types of information in phenotype. Again, let me stress that with the genotype files, the examples are all just text files. We're not providing you with Excel. But as soon as you just import it in, and you can put it into an Excel file and muck with it all you like. Basically, for the annotations, you're going to have 1 line per experiment. So in this example, we're loading 3 different experiments. The breeding program was, again, the CAP data program, NDG, that's North Dakota, genotyping, the year. And as you know, when you save to a tab delimited text, the columns get kind of messy. But what you're also calling in this file are the names of the raw data that T3 is going to expect. Okay, so let's go back and let's try to upload some examples. So again, it lets you browse. We have 1 trial submission form, and this I basically just downloaded as an example, so this should work. Upload the annotations file, expecting tab delimited. And come on, you. Maybe I did the wrong one. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. So this basically tells us, this reads the file in. It tells us what it's expecting, what we've put in. And then it knows where the raw data files are in this sheet. And then it gives you an opportunity to upload those raw data files. Sometimes those will be available through Xiaomen's SharePoint. I know with the large experiments, those remain there. Other times, if people are doing their own experiments, like say they go to Fargo, they may be taking those files home with them. The OPA file is basically the manifest file. That's really the translation of your markers. The cluster file is can only really be limited if you have the software that goes with Illumina. And then this is your sample sheet that will, pretty much revisit the experiment and tell you what was in the plate and where. I really want to redo this button because it's not really a query, it's really an upload. But for example, so if you have this in, you put all your files in, you hit that button and it will enter your data for you. And note that it will enter it even though you don't have that raw data there. It just tells you that it's missing, but it's entered successfully, and that's always a good thing to see. Lots of ways you can break it. Okay, on the results file, you have to basically load 2 files at the same time. So you're loading a line translation file, which gives you the line name in 1 column, tab delimited, this small tab here, and then this is the trial code in the next column over. Those trial codes have to already be in the database, and they have to be recognized by T3 when you load this file. Okay, so you basically browse to that file there, and then browse to your data file here, and I could enter that if I like. Open. Telling it it's 2D, I'll go ahead and put one in there just for laughs and giggles. You have to have your email address entered because all of this processing is done offline. All right, so you're pretty confident you've got your files right. You get those loaded. Again, 2D is our default because I don't want to put anyone through having to load 1D files. And once you do that, it'll just give you the message that it's been submitted offline. Okay, so then you go over to the web browser that you've entered. The good news is if you have a fatal error, you usually know in about 10 seconds, okay? And that the error messages are very good about, usually, sometimes, about letting you know where it choked. So in this case, the fatal problem was where the trial code in one of my was accidentally 385. This should be 384 for all of them. I can show you that. Okay, so this is where I introduced that error. This was the file I loaded. So here's all of our line names properly, and then I just put that one 385 bobble in there. Okay, so again, it's usually pretty good about telling you what the problem was. Let me go find another error down the way. You see I've got a lot of them, but sometimes they're not always obvious. Okay, so here's one where it got to this particular line name, turkey PI or pipe PI, and it didn't see that line name in the database, so it stopped uploading the data. So there is fail-safe for that as well. And then you'd have to just go back. Oftentimes you just have a typo in your data file. But again, we try to be pretty explicit. And if you're trying to do this on the Sandbox, and if you're getting cryptic errors, and you're just, it can kind of make you crazy after a while, just write to us. And sometimes we can figure it out pretty quickly for you. Once you do get this, or with the fatal errors, or if you get this is always the happy one. It takes you a little longer to get it. It says it's completed successfully. You can always click this link, and it gives you kind of a log of how that went in. 400 data entries for this particular marker, and you can just kind of go through this. And if there's an error, it will usually spell out the error for you too. But this was good news. Okay, I think that was all I wanted to say about genotype files.
Okay, so those are the basic types of data that are stored on T3. I realize that we've gone through this pretty darn quickly. I think there are two kinds of feedback that could be useful at this point. One is if anybody has questions, please fire away. The other is if you would like to have a reiteration of this kind of a presentation, but you would like it done in a different way. So we've just kind of done it by having Dave and Vic do relatively quick demos. I'm not sure if it would overload the database if we had a whole number of you logged on trying to do it manually, or trying to upload data in practice, sort of as we went along. But all I'm thinking is that there may be some value to actually doing the manipulation as opposed to seeing us do it. All right, so good. We have a question. Yes. So to submit the genotyping data, the breeders have to submit the lines first. So the lines have to exist in the database before the database can accept genotype information on those lines.
Thanks. That was a good question.
So we kind of showed the steps in order that they need to happen. That is, to some extent, the lines need to be submitted first with their properties. Then, once the lines are in, you could submit genotype data about them at any time. If you want to submit some phenotype data, in addition to the lines that were phenotyped, you also have to submit some information about the experiment in which you did the phenotyping, or the trial.
I forgot to mention that we just completed a genotype experiment upload tutorial as well, and that will be on linked on the participants page this afternoon. Pretty much just goes over what I showed you just now.
So that thing that Vic mentioned about when you first arrive on the home page of T3, there is a let me see. You can click on data submission. So here I'll share my screen hopefully you can see my screen at this point.
Yep.
So I'm on the home page of the Barley Sandbox in this case. Right here where my pointer is the data submission, and so Vic has called this the one-stop shop for data submission, and it is. It's both. It gives you the templates. It will take you to where to submit the stuff, and it has tutorials.
So the instructions at the top indicate something about the sequence and what has to be loaded before what. And probably I should have listed markers ahead of genotyping, because Gina is quite correct. We must have the marker, basic marker information, the names loaded before you can load any data about them.
Yes, that's right.
So that means we need to get with Gina about which markers she wants to load.
So it's true that at this point the only kinds of markers that we're set up to load are Illumina SNPs. And there may be a few other markers, but the vast majority of markers are Illumina SNPs.
For Barley, we have a good number of SSRs and RFLPs and so forth loaded as well. Yes, Paul. So the templates for marker information, there's several different kinds of information you can provide about the markers. I believe the basic thing we need is only the name of the marker, but that's the least. But we really would like to have sequence information, a tag sequence or whatever for all the markers. And yeah, in order to get into the production database, like everything else, they go through Vicki.
Okay. If anybody has a question they want to ask, please start typing, and then I'll wait. Otherwise, it's about 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central, and we're done with the webinar.
Looks like Paul was typing. Paul, did you have a question? Already answered?
Yeah, I think so. He was asking if I was dealing with the marker data. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate everybody who joined in, and by all means, please start playing with the Sandbox. That's what it's there for. So as you have data, if you're a grad student and you want to try loading up some of your data, please do that. I mean, it'll help us debug the system. We do need to start getting the TCAP data in here. As I said, it's a source of active concern for the Scientific Advisory Board, that we get the data in a timely fashion. So we're very anxious about it. And the fact that we're anxious means that we are very eager to help you. So Vic is very easy to approach. By all means, send her an email.
Some days.
Well, so, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
And is everybody who participated today in the Plant Breeding Training Network already? Do you know how to access that site? Because that is where this talk will be posted.